I did a lot of thinking since the last podcast, and I realized I left everyone with a really tough question to answer. And that was, are you ready to take a journey towards how you want to live your life? Or, okay, if you're not ready yet, don't do this exercise. And it got me thinking that maybe you don't know that you're ready or don't know when you're ready. And the one thing that I don't want to happen for anyone is I don't want anyone to have to hit that rock bottom. So I hit a rock bottom about 8 years ago. This has been a long journey. This has been a very long journey. So we're talking 8 years now. I hit a personal rock bottom. The person in my life who had been narcissistically abusing me at the time nearly ruined my marriage, had ruined relationships I had with people. And I had to do some healing pretty quick, quicker than most people would want to. I'd love for it to be a personal choice. I'd love for you to be, watching this, listening to this, and think, you know what, I need to make some changes. The problem with that is that most of the time we are scared to make those changes, honestly, because it means a lot of different things for us. It could mean being lonely. It could mean, and in that essence, like losing all your friends, lonely, or just having that fear of being alone. Um, it could mean, am I going to change so much that I don't like the same people, that I don't want to do the same things? This means I have to actually look at my own stuff, and I don't want to do that. So sometimes what happens is we let all of the pain and the trauma dictate our lives and how we go through it. And we end up having to hit a rock bottom, or as another dear friend of mine put it to me, a breaking point to where you have to make the changes. And wouldn't it be great if we could address on the front end what those changes would need to be, and see that it is possible to do that? So what I've seen in people who don't change before they reach that breaking point, right? Who don't do that, they kind of sleep through their lives. And I know I gave the example in the last podcast of me not being able to, send back a cup of coffee, because I mean, I essentially didn't exist. I didn't exist as a person. And this is because I can trace it back to my childhood as far as how my identity had been essentially erased. And so I was beholden to other people's needs and wants. And that's how it happens, is over time, it's a slow erosion of your boundaries and your personality to where you have none of either. And what I see in people and saw in myself is you keep doing the same thing day after day, thinking that sometime at some point it's going to get better. The problem is that it never gets better, because you're just hoping and wishing. And honestly, these kind of things, trauma doesn't resolve itself without trying to do something about it. Now maybe you don't know that you've had trauma. Maybe that's something that you have to look at. And that's one of the things I talked about, is going back and trying to identify, maybe where this happened, maybe what happened in your life that gave you that inability to say no. But I see, like, people just going through their lives and not being able to find a partner that's like truly a partner, always getting into abusive and neglectful relationship after abusive and neglectful relationship, and a lot of times just thinking that these people are drawn to them, or that they're just not choosing right, or all these extenuating circumstances that all lead back to honestly an unresolved trauma within ourselves that is pushing us towards people who are going to have that upper hand in the relationship, who aren't going to be equal, but who only want someone in a relationship that they can control and that doesn't have any opinions. And then they can walk right all over and have that other person, do their bidding and do whatever they want. And I see it so frequently. And I was also that person. I had this huge, huge hole in my heart that could only be filled by people who were just like me or people who wanted to neglect me. I found a lot of comfort actually in people who were just like me and would tell me that I was okay. I was fine. I'm fine the way I am. And I think a lot of them use the phrase of being beautifully broken. And I realized after a certain point that broken isn't beautiful, but healing yourself is. And it's been 8 years. I say, it's been a long time, and there are still little things, little corners I find all the time that I'm like, oh, okay, that isn't completely resolved. And I think healing is very much like an onion. Those bloomin' onions that you can get. it's like an appetizer, and the onions just fall out, and there's always one that you don't see. And even 8 years down the road, I still find things here and there, because how do you undo that many years of trauma quickly? You don't. But that also goes back to me saying that I hit this rock bottom to where I had to start the process pretty quickly. I had to get my stuff together. Or again, I was going to lose my marriage. I was going to lose any good people in my life. I had things to lose. I wasn't doing well at my job. And, I had to do something. When I talked about, the people that just go through life like wishing and hoping that things were better, not realizing that you can make it better. You can make it better yourself. It is possible. But I think one of the most unsettling things I've seen, and this was when I was first, if I go back to when I was first trying to do a lot of healing from being narcissistically abused, like in pretty much my entire life, from my parents, through boyfriends, through family, up until, the one that put the nail in the coffin for me. I went to YouTube a lot. And, it's funny because most people come to knowing what they've been through by Googling the symptoms. Like, why does my boyfriend do this to me? Why does you start Googling why a person is treating you the way you are. And that's how you kind of come to it. And so I was watching all these, YouTube educators on narcissism, and some I still follow today just for, a new insight. But what's troubling is when you see the same people in the comments year after year after year, and knowing that they haven't gone any farther, that they get stuck in that place, and wanting to go, yeah, that happened to me too, that happened to me too. And the validation is very real. But also then the validation becomes intoxicating, just as much as the people around you were, just as much as being with a narcissistic person was. It's almost like trading one, and I'll call it an addiction. Okay, so it's like trading one addiction for another. And you never really get down that road of healing. You just stay around people who are going to build you up, who are going to absolutely validate you. Oh, you're fine. You're good the way you are. And you know what? I don't want to be somebody that says you're not good enough, the way you are, because of course you are. Everyone deserves a certain amount of respect just for being alive and a human on this planet. I believe that everyone is good enough. What I am saying is you could be so much more happy and content and have a really good life And I don't think up until 8 years ago, I had a really good life. And that's a regret, right? Because I can't get all those years back. Now, I'm not saying there weren't cool things. I didn't do a lot of I did a lot of cool things. I did a lot of cool things. I've done a lot of things that a lot of my friends probably will never have the chance to in their lifetime. And so this is not what I'm saying. But was I happy and satisfied on the inside? Never. No, because I had this huge hole in my heart. And what that was for me was because I didn't have a good enough family. Like I say good enough because no one's perfect. Nothing, no situation's perfect. Definitely families aren't perfect. But I didn't even have one that was good enough. And I was always looking for that family. Unfortunately, when we're looking for something like that, we are gravitating towards what family has looked like to us. So if your family was abusive in any way, then that's unfortunately subconsciously what you're looking for. And that's how I got into all these relationships. I mean, they were so great. Everyone's like, you're my sister and I love you. And I fall for it. Hook, line, and sinker. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm your sister. Oh, I mean so much to you. And just to find out later that it was only for what they could use me for. In fact, most of the relationships that I've been in have been what I could do for them. Didn't find out about it till later. But the thing is, going back to talking about the people getting stuck there year after year and not progressing, they're not really solving the problem so that they can go out. They don't need to watch those for. For me now, if I watch anything like that, it's studying because of what I do. But I'm not in there for validation anymore. I know what I've been through. I'm very, very, very sure what I've been through. And that the people who have been around me have not always had my best interests at heart. So no, I know. The problem that stems with a lot of people is that, and I've heard this many, many times, it's like, why should I have to do the healing if someone else hurt me? Like, why? That's like saying, someone stabbed me and I just need to let the wound like bleed out. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's not your fault, but it's definitely your responsibility to heal so that you can be happy. No one's coming to save you. I had someone who said that to me, and it was a coach I was working with. No one's coming to save you. So many times that's what we want, right? We want it to be that one person who's going to save us and do all the right things that we need. And no one is coming to save you. And no one's going to be that person. And if they are probably too good to be true. And that's a hard reality. But it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. Like I said, if you have an open wound, if someone stabbed you, it is not your fault. But your body has to be the one that heals. Not healing from the trauma that you were caused. And I'm not talking about, we're down the road, so you've kind of put it out of your mind. The time heals all wounds things. Not necessarily. So I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the time heals all wounds, because it actually doesn't. It just kind of shoves them down into your subconscious. You just don't think about it anymore instead of taking the time to deal with it. And I see so much resistance to healing because you think that when you're deemed the codependent in the relationship, you are not the narcissist, you are the codependent. Everyone all of a sudden gets this like codependent halo, right? That I'm the angel, they're the devil, so they need to get their stuff together. Problem is, the reason that we open ourselves up to these people is what I've mentioned before. We have this gigantic hole And unfortunately, these people know how to, they got game. Okay. They got game and they know how to get it. And this can happen to anybody. This can happen to you, whether you are the smartest person in the world. This can happen to you. Like, even if you think you're like so boundaried, it can happen. They just have to push that right button. And they'll dip their toe in looking for it. They'll find that button if you're the one that they're going after. In fact, a lot of times they like to go for the tough ones. There's almost like a trophy feeling to that. So that's why it's not only your duty to heal, but it is a huge, huge responsibility. Because look, you get into a fight, you get hurt, or someone tries to, accost you on the street, you get hurt, you might take a self-defense course. Okay. Think of this as inner self-defense. And it's not that, you're taking the responsibility for what happened to you, right? It's your responsibility to heal, but it's not your fault. So you're not taking the responsibility of, getting hurt by someone, which is not your fault, but you are taking the responsibility to give yourself better tools to deal with it when someone else tries to come along into your life. And I'll tell you, they can sniff it out. In fact, what I really find really funny now is people that kind of give me the icks because I see like the red flags coming. They don't really want much to do with me because they can tell. They can tell how you carry yourself. If you're a people pleaser, if maybe you have, low self-esteem, that all goes hand in hand, honestly. And they can sniff it out that way. So when people like to say, oh, I just attract them, I like to say you let them in and let them stay too long. They're attracted to everyone. They just want to see who's going to let them stay the longest. And unfortunately, that's been those of us who have codependency issues. I'm not proud of it. I'm not proud of the issues. I'm not proud of the person it caused me to be for a while. You hang out in that way too long and you become a person that you don't want to be. I love this saying, narcissistic fleas. That just spells it out so nice. Because if you're around a dog that has fleas, they're going to jump onto you. And a lot of people who get into relationships with this person start absorbing some of the icky traits. I say icky a lot, but some of the more undesirable, let's go with that. Some of the more undesirable traits that they didn't have before the relationship. I can't hang out with the same group of people that I used to hang out with. And there was a lot of inappropriate boundary breaks in so many ways. I gave too much. I let people touch me inappropriately. I wasn't very kind to people I should have been kind to. Oh, I was nice. And we can always get into that. As a people pleaser, you're always very nice, but you're not necessarily kind. And that's just another reason for taking responsibility for your healing, because you may not understand the ways that you may have not been the greatest person. And looking at your own stuff takes some courage. What I'm here to say is that it's not as scary as you think it's not fun. Oh, like all those things I just told you, that used to make me feel really nauseous in the pit of my stomach to say. Because I've always considered myself to be generally good, generally, nice person. And And by the way, I don't like to even say that. I feel like if you have to say that, it's funny because I watch people go, "I'm a nice person. I'm a nice person." If you have to say that, it's almost like a methinks doth protest too much, you know? Uh, but generally, just in talking about my life, I did always consider myself to be a very nice person. But when I started to look at it more and more, and the ways in which being around brokenness and being around abusive and neglectful people, I realized the things in me that may have been extremely undesirable to people who may have wanted to have healthy relationships with me. And so that's where I've concentrated now more, now that I've, come a certain distance with healing. When I was surrounded by lots and lots of people, my tribe, see again, that family hole I had, right? So I'm surrounded by my tribe. We're all a tribe. These are the ways we describe each other on social media. I realized I didn't have a real friend in the bunch in the end. Hardly. Once I started being of less value to those around me because I was healing, I was, people don't check on me as much. People don't talk to me as much. I'm not of any use to anyone. And that's okay because I don't want to be of use to someone. I'm at a point now where I want to be a nice addition to their life. See the difference? It's the difference between needs and wants. If you need a person to be around because they can do something for you, or if you just would really like for someone to be around because they're cool, you want to hang out with them. Uh, Once you have an interaction with them, it's cool afterwards. You're like, man, that was a really good time with, so and so. I had a really good time hanging out. And some people did try to still have a relationship with me. And I think that I was a little distanced because I realized our relationship was a bit transactional. And I didn't want to cultivate that anymore in my life, honestly. So the whole purpose of this was to say, are you ready or are you not ready? And think about if you're not ready to take those steps, why? Why what fear is genuinely holding you back? Because what isn't I can tell you from being there, what isn't very fun is when you're forced into it. I'm gonna be honest, I'm glad I was forced into it. Because I'm not sure I would have done it without being forced. At the same time, I don't feel like the information was available to me that's available today. And you do the best with the information that you had at the time. So be gentle on yourself because we didn't have all this. Even 8 years ago, narcissism was generally a really, really new topic. Codependency wasn't because codependency came up within like AA meetings. That's where the term came from, right? So, but how people became codependent, and we have quite a codependency, explosion. We have a codependency problem more than we have a narcissistic abuse problem because they go on and make more codependents, the one. So I really feel like there was less information uh, out there before I was forced into this than there is now. And now there's so much information and so many people who are doing it and changing their lives that I don't feel anymore. You need to hit that rock bottom or breaking point that you could say, you know what? I'm not living a very satisfactory life. And there's got to be a way that I can not be as depressed about everything that's going on around me. And I'm not talking about like, okay, the news, we all know the news is depressing right now. So depressing right now. That's valid. That's valid. But if your relationships are making you consistently depressed, if you feel consistently alone, even though you're around a bunch of people, if you're not feeling like you get to express yourself, if you're feeling like you're always getting walked over, then these are things that you can change about your life now without having to hit that, point where it's crucial that you change it and you change it fast. Sure, you may be okay. And, some of the people that I described earlier, the people that are just going from narcissistic relationship to narcissistic relationship and just being in a big crowd of people that love them, they're okay. They're okay right now. Something will happen. That rock bottom will happen. May not be now, maybe 20 years from now. But when trauma like this isn't healed, it's going to catch up with you. And better to take care of it now than, get to your, olden days, you're sitting around going, wow, I wasted my life. I wasted my life on people who didn't love me. I wasted my life doing things that I had no business doing. Reason I say that is because that's me. I wasted my life doing things that I had no business doing. I can tell you prior to 8 years ago, I wasted a good 5 years of my life. 4 or 5 years. 4. Something like that. They overlapped that 8 from when I started. And then I realized, when I was the first year or two into healing, I was like, oh, and realized there were things I shouldn't be doing and stop doing them. And because everything I did in my life was for somebody else. It was never for me. It was never about me. It was to keep somebody else happy. I mean, I was doing things I liked. There were some things I did that I liked, but I was doing them with other people. And the big thing for me was keep these other people happy. And then you'll get to still have this too. So see how that becomes transactional, and see how that becomes you not being kind. We'll leave it on that. We'll look at nice versus kind on the next episode. But until then, everyone go ahead and make your life your mission. We'll see you later.